Blast off. Here we are. Want to welcome everybody to today's broadcast here on Wisdom Cafe on episode 9 of Meet the Expert. And my name is Bob Choat. I'm the Transformational Grandmaster, and my co-host is the beautiful Sofie Nubani, the queen of laughter and wisdom. Sofie, how is it there on the East Coast?
It is beautiful as we make
Yeah.
of it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
So you're down in Florida, as we know, and
Yes.
yes, and I'm all the way here in LA. And our guest tonight hails from near the DC area. I'm not sure if he's there today. He's all over the world. I mean, he's a world traveler.
Global expert.
Yeah, so I would just say he's a global entrepreneur, mindset expert, everything. Gerhard Gschwandtner, and I've known him for a few years now, and this guy is so amazing that it's been 30 years since I first subscribed to his audio cassettes, Selling Power magazine, and listened to all the interviews and everything like that. And he's interviewed some of the top people in this world. I'm going to grab his little bio here. So again, he's a founder and CEO of Selling Power, and it's a media company. And if you guys get a chance, go to sellingpower.com. You'll find out more. And both his magazine and his TV, Selling Power TV, where he does a daily video interview series on sales success. He developed, created, and hosts the Sales 3.0 conference, and where he helps sales leaders integrate sales technologies into their sales organizations to create improved sales effectiveness and greater customer value. Over these last 3 decades, again, like I said, he's interviewed many of the top leaders and experts in sales, business, sports, entertainment, politics, and so much more, including Michael Dell, George Foreman, Larry Ellison, Richard Branson, Jay Leno, Meg Whitman, Mary Kay Ash, and so many more. And I've told Sofie already about a few of those. On top of that, he's studied every one of them and others on peak performance. And he's worked with some of the top coaches and psychologists to create his peak performance mindset program, which I am so privileged to be a part of. He's the author of 17 books on sales, management, motivation, and I would even say leadership. And he's received the Sales and Marketing Executives International Inc. back in 2010 Ambassador of Free Enterprise Award. So I really want to welcome this amazing person that every one of you really need to follow him, learn, go grab his information, because he is the guy that has not only the connections, but he's absorbed all of the teachings and all the studies to help countless people. So Gerhard, I want to welcome you to our show.
Since that is number 9, I feel like on cloud 9 to be with you guys.
There you go. We are in that high frequency already. And we're so honored.
I have watched your broadcast, and I thought, what is that? It's about laughter and wisdom. And I thought, there's a lot of sagacity in those 2 words. People love to laugh. People love to have fun. And, most people don't know how to have fun anymore. And I think wisdom is something that we all need to guide our lives. And we all want to do better. We all sort of are driven by, I remember you mentioned Mary Kay. And one of the most important takeaways from my interview with her was where she says, Gerhard, so many people die with their music still unplayed. And I said, can you explain that? And she says, well, we're all born with an instrument, and we need to learn what it is, and then learn how to play it. And the instrument is really our mind, and it's our mindset. And we want to develop a mindset operating system, if you will, that helps you achieve a higher level of functioning on a cognitive level, on an emotional level, and on a physical level.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it brings us to a very good alignment and center, where clarity becomes our guide into our path and journey, definitely.
Yeah, and you talk about clarity. We live in an age where there's so much information. We have an abundance of information. And most people suffer from poverty of attention. And they're not present when you speak with them. They're not now people, they're next people. They say next, swipe, and always keep their eyes on the next thing, instead of becoming aware that the present moment is all we got.
Yes. Yes. I remember watching people on an e-scooter. I mean, just heard about that e-scooter death of that one well-known YouTuber, and where a vehicle hit her. But I've seen e-scooters, people here on e-scooters, on their e-scooters, and they're going down and they're looking at this thing.
Wow.
Their phone, when they should be going and being observant, being in a moment. Yet
I had this conversation with about 5 or 6 cab drivers in Paris, and I was amazed by 2 things. One is that most cabs in Paris have Wi-Fi, so you can check up on your email if you're not connected. And secondly, they're all very negative about the e-scooters because they see accidents pretty much every single day. And in Paris, they're daredevils. You know, some e-scooters have 2 people on one scooter, and they weave in and out of traffic. And one cab driver said, just the day before, a 16-year-old crashed near the Eiffel Tower and died on the spot. What a waste of life. And and I think that's another example where we need to rethink the boundaries of technology, because although everybody loves technology, technology is like medicine. It has side effects. It can kill you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. We think about a lot of cities now, the IoT that's really taking place and grabbing hold, and really integrating technology on a larger level, and yet we're getting more and more disconnected as humans, and we're plugged into the technology, but we're plugged out of us. And
a lot of people, argue about technology versus humanity, and that's not the right question. The right question is technology for humanity.
Yes.
The
master or the slave.
Right.
What do we choose to be?
Exactly. And who is the, I was just in a restaurant yesterday, and there's a family of 4, and they were having dinner, and all 4 were glued to their smartphones. The 2 kids, well, 2 kids actually, they're watching on videos on their iPads while they were eating in a restaurant, and the 2 parents, they were glued to their smartphones. And I thought, this is crazy.
Yes.
Now, is this as common and noticeable in Europe as it is here as well?
Pretty much so. I see people in France or in Austria using smartphones and being glued to it. It is universal. And, Steve Jobs had a wonderful vision, and he made a dent in the universe with the iPhone. However, it has affected not just our behavior, our lives, but it also impacts our brain, the way we think.
Yes. Our neurotransmitters are getting affected.
Right.
Our patterns are changing the habits.
I don't know whether you've seen those brain scans where when two people talking and one person shares a story with somebody else. What is curious that the same regions of the brain that the storyteller has, on the screen, light up in the listener and follow that story and take delight in that story. But when people are glued to their phones, the brain scans actually look different. They don't look as rich. They look more automatic. They look like sort of one-dimensional. And I think that we are taking away the richness of life because we narrow everything to zeros and ones.
Yes, true. Very true.
As beautiful technology is, and it has done amazing work, including laser treatments, a lot of things, right?
Right.
It's just the abuse and the boundary setting and the addiction and lack of discipline, dealing and truly monitoring one's habits is what's taking over by default.
Right.
And that's becoming very excessive and noticeable that, like you mentioned, even children at a very young age, I mean, they could be even 2 years old. I see kids that are actually good at going to the pictures and they're so smart and young, and they're like getting it so fast, but it becomes part of their way and living, and then it's really eliminating their creativity and their participation in being fully present and aware, and also communication in building real solid and quality relationships.
Right.
Now, there are some young people, like the young girl I interviewed about 2.5 years ago. Her name is M.E.T.A, and in fact, Gerhard, you need to interview this girl. I'm serious.
All right.
So she's the founder of Coder Bunnies, and Coder Bunnies is a board game, not a computer. It's actually a physical board game that teaches kids all the way up to 90 years old how to code, how to do computer coding.
Wow.
And she has conducted like classes up in the Bay Area, because that's where she lives, and she like all over there. She was recognized in 2016 by President Obama at that time, and the city of San Francisco, as well as the closing bell over on Wall Street. And again, that was the year before I interviewed her. So that was about 3 years ago. She also spoke at the Women in the Women in Tech conference, and she was the one that stole the show over all the others, more experienced in terms of the CEOs there. So the CEO of Coder Bunnies, her. So
and when Times Magazine, right? Just recognize her. Times.
So yeah, so she's going to be in Time coming up, and so here's the interesting thing about her is that when I interviewed her 2 years ago, she had just turned 9.
Exactly.
9 years old. She founded Coder Bunnies when she was like 6.5 or 7. But she was creative, and her parents allowed her to be creative. And she's not ruled by technology, as you said. And where I want to ask you regarding like everything you've done, because I know you've used a lot of technology, but you've been able to control it and use it for the past 3 decades. That's been able to really help humans be humans, but still using technology from the audio cassettes that you did back in the day to what you're doing now online. And this is just Selling Power Magazine and Selling Power TV and a Sales 3.0 conference. How have you been able to, at least from a sales point of view, being able to integrate technology that can make humans better?
I think that's a very good question, and I'm thinking about how to sort of give you some actionable advice that I found very useful. What I like to be creative, and I like to keep my mind focused on the things that I want to accomplish. And most information technology is a disruption. It's not something that for example, on my smartphone, you won't find any news channel. I don't get news alerts. I don't care about the news anymore. If something important happens, other people tell me. But I'm not interested in absorbing information and get involved in CNN and ABC and CBS or I don't watch Netflix. I don't watch Hulu. I don't watch movies. I don't watch television. I want to lead a life that I design and not a life that's imposed by technology on me. And so saying no to distracting, useless information is the key to sanity. I'm the only social media that I really do is I connect on LinkedIn, and I try to connect in meaningful ways. I don't tweet. I have people that tweet for me, so I have a Twitter profile, but I don't go on Pinterest. I check out Facebook once a week, and I know that I'm saving, compared to the average American, about 8 to 10 hours a week, where I can feel more productive and design my time the way I want to design it.
Yes.
Very
yes.
smart tip.
Yes. Yes. And I think the people that are watching this should take that and design their own life. I think that's imperative, instead of letting whatever else control it, instead of letting your mind be on autopilot through whatever technology is there at that time. And a lot of it's what you've done. It sounds like using technology to your advantage to create the habits that you want to create to rise, and as you teach about peak performance, to have that peak performance mindset.
I refuse to become or turn into a digital sheep.
Yes. You use technology to teach, and you use technology with your creative ideas to allow it to serve those ideas and allow those ideas to go to production and allow masses to receive them. And one of the things that I do like is like the videos, like teaching through the videos and that type of format, which is very fast and it's like visual, but it's teaching something. It's not making the mind at just looking at something and just literally recording. It's stimulating, engaging, and participating, and allowing the person to literally challenge their own thoughts or whatever they're seeing and being engaged in that
Right.
process.
Well, there's another thing I like to share, the way I see how our minds operate. And to make a comparison to TV channels, our mind is like 3 channels in one that operates simultaneously. Let me explain that. One channel is the history channel, where we tune into what was, tune into our memories, tune into the past. And I would say that more than 50% of Americans think about their past and they remember negative things during the day that happened a long time ago. Those are unresolved problems that they carry with them. The second channel is CNN. What is happening today? What is happening in the here and now? And people who live in the past, they cannot absorb the present. They cannot enjoy the present moment. And the third channel is the sci-fi channel. It's sort of the preoccupation with the future. And a lot of people have dreams about what they want to become or what they want to do, what they want to achieve. And they set goals and they have dreams. So they fantasize about a better future. But they cannot get quite there because their past is really holding them back from embracing the future, because the past is sort of flooding the awareness of the present. So by studying the mindset and how the mindset operates, I've discovered that there are ways where people can become more themselves and become more aware, more mindful of what the present moment is all about. And another way to look at it is to look at a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, you have 3 levels. At the bottom, you have the implanted mindset, meaning those are all the impressions and belief systems and habits that you learn from your parents or from your caretakers. And in the middle, there's the imprinted mindset, which is the impressions you got, people who impressed you, like your teachers and your mentors and your professors, and the important friends or heroes. They give you a lot of content where you process that and then integrate that into your belief system. And then there's a higher level, which I would call the inspired mindset, which is your inner voice. Everybody has inner magic. We're all alive on the spaceship Earth, traveling through the universe. What a trip that is. It's such a privilege to be here. And everybody's unique, and yet in a way we are all connected. We are all the same. But we need to recognize that our voice is like our guide. It's almost, the voice creates a narrative, and that narrative adds to what I call a guiding fiction. What do you want to do with your life? And we need to listen to that. So by looking at the implanted, imprinted, and inspired mindset, we can actually design a life that's so much better.
Yes. And it's funny that you mentioned, especially on the inspired mindset, an analogy of the spaceship traveling through space, because it was 50 years ago today that we had that Saturn V carrying 3 astronauts on a mission called Apollo 11 that took off towards their inspired life, that inspired a nation and even a world at that time. And I know that you remember it very clearly, right?
Wasn't it Jim Lovell?
No.
Oh.
Jim Lovell, well, that was with Apollo 13.
Right.
Yes, but it was Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong.
Right, went to the moon.
Buzz Aldrin, yes.
Right.
Yes, so that was 50 years ago today that they took off on their Apollo 11 with that Saturn V blasting up, and it was earlier in the 60s that it was President Kennedy that inspired a nation to land a man on the moon.
10 years earlier, right?
Yep.
And that, that's a great example of the inspired mindset that I think that we are all idea catchers somehow.
Yes.
we ideas float through space or whatever it is, through the ether all the time, and they're available if your mind is open to it. And if you have a certain amount of curiosity and pay attention to the marvelous ideas that are accessible to everybody. And once, you're both very curious, and you both want to share the excitement about becoming a peak performer with a lot of other people, and you inspire people to laugh, to be happy, to have fun, and to achieve extraordinary things. And we can only become extraordinary if we recognize the extraordinary, and that begins with intentions. So if I begin my day with the intention to do one extraordinary thing, it may be a little thing, a random act of kindness, listening more intently and trying to understand somebody else, where they're coming from, and maybe helping them. And that can make a big difference. You can make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. Yes. And we can share our experience. I remember in the early 80s, I interviewed Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. He was the author of The Power of Positive Thinking. And what struck me as interesting, first of all, I read every one of his books before I showed up for the interview. And I wanted to ask him questions that nobody else has asked, because I looked at the newspaper articles and the magazine articles. And what struck me was that he admitted himself that he had negative thoughts. So here's the author of The Power of Positive Thinking saying, and he gave me a great analogy, I'll never forget that. He says, negative thoughts are like birds that fly over your head. You cannot prevent the birds flying over your head, but you can prevent them from building a nest in your hair.
Yes.
Yes.
And it seems like that's what many people do. Isn't that right? They probably have a huge nest that's filled with all this negative thinking, and it's been sitting there, and it's probably even have cobwebs around the nest and everything like that, and it's been holding for a long time.
Right. Wow. And NIH studies show that we experience about 60,000 thoughts a day. 60,000, and 80% of them are negative. So we are wired to think negatively automatically, and it takes a conscious effort to translate those negative thoughts into more realistic, more positive, and self-enhancing thoughts. Another way to look at it, I just did a conference in Chicago, and I usually have some trick where I ask for a volunteer in the audience, and let's say his name is Bob, and I said, I need a volunteer, and Bob comes up, and I shake hands, and what's your name? Well, my name is Bob Choat, and I say, thank you for coming up, give him a big round of applause, and here's your $100.
I saw that interview.
Have a seat, okay? So then Bob sits down, and he's smiling, and then I go to the table where Bob was sitting, and I said, why didn't you come up to get your $100? And then I get answers like, well, I wanted Bob to come, or I did not know what was expected. And then I found this guy is about 6'5", looked like a football player. And I said, why didn't you come up and get your $100? And he says, well, I didn't know what to expect. You know, I was a little worried, and I said, why don't you come with me and get a feeling for what it's like to be on stage? Okay, would you be game for that? And he said, yeah. So he walked with me, and I said, while you're walking, you just think about every emotion that you're experiencing right now and what you're thinking. So you become more aware of your thought process and your feelings. And then as he was on stage, I said, you know, describe what you were experiencing. And he says, well, it's really interesting because on one hand, I was excited to be on stage, to be honest with you, although I'm not a speaker. But on the other hand, I was worried that you would ask me to do something that I couldn't do, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. So I said, well, there's sort of a, you know, an inner critic that lives in every one of us. And I said, you know, your left shoulder, there's maybe a little devil that says you're not good enough. That's the inner critic. And on the right-hand side, there's your inner champion. And there's a wonderful Cherokee story where the grandfather said that, you know, life is really, you know, a battle between two wolves that live within you, and one is benevolent and kind and gracious and confident, and the other wolf is going to tear you down. It's sad, it's angry, and then the grandchild said, "Well, grandfather, what? Which wolf is going to win?" And he said, "The one that you feed."
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know whether I told the story accurately, but you get the,
it's close. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So the challenge we all have is how to translate the inner critic into the inner champion. And what we use in our seminars, as you know, Bob, we use the anchoring technique where we anchor that feeling with a little fist pump and say yes and recall that. And that's what we're actually going to do next week in LA. I mean, this week on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. See, that's my anchor.
Right. But we're actually going to a racetrack, and people are going to drive a Lamborghini, and
nice.
And they feel their energy, you know, their adrenaline pump, because we need to remind people to breathe because it's so exciting. And then we also John.
Now, are you going to get Jim to drive his new his XK8? You know that Jim had just picked up, I believe it was a 2003 Jaguar XK8.
Right. Yeah, Jim is going to come as well. But we also do tandem jumps at a drop zone. And what is interesting that we're going to take pictures with people in their cars who are jumping out of an airplane. And then they have those pictures on their desk later on.
Yes.
Anchor the experience. And all they need to do is look at that picture and say, wow, I did this, you know, and that awakens the inner champion.
Yeah. You know, you addressed something that was cool in one of your events, and you just mentioned about when you asked for a volunteer, and the person that came, you actually gave them $100, and then you asked a few others, and then you mentioned, well, those were the excuses,
right,
of why you didn't have that.
Right,
so,
right.
You know, being a person who's curious, who steps forth and takes a risk and doesn't just stay in a corner and always, you know, I don't know if I'm safe enough, if the water's cold, you know, too cold for me to try to even get in. And you're like, sometimes you really have to just walk into your confidence and take that and see what comes out of your opportunity. Because obviously they are in a seminar and an event, and they're coming to see you, and knowing why they even, you know, book to buy your tickets to be there. Obviously, they know that you're there to teach them something, yet the majority, when you ask for a volunteer, did not raise their hands.
Right.
and you wanted to teach them and anchor something to them, like this who did and walked towards
You
it.
know,
This is
the
what
thing
they
is, what I did in that instant, I gave the audience an assignment and said, pair up with somebody and share with the other person what makes you awesome, and then change roles. And while the audience was doing that, I asked that football player, can you give me a moment in your life? Can you recall one moment where you felt on top of the world? And he says, yeah, I know instantly. And I said, what was it? And he says, well, I actually played football and in college, and it was a championship game, and I caught an interception. And that was the beginning of the turnaround. We were losing. And that adrenaline high from catching that interception, hearing the roar of the crowd, and changing the game, he says, I was feeding off that for months because everybody in school, you know, was commenting on it, and I was a hero. And I said, you know, anchor that feeling, have that feeling in your fist, and do that fist pump and say yes. And so you can recall it later. And I said, I make a deal with you. If you share that story about your inner champion, then you get the $100 because you deserve a reward. I said, is it a deal? And he says, yes. So then I turned to the audience, turned it around, and I said, can you share a story where you felt on top of the world? So he told the story. And then he really screamed, yes!
Yes.
And the audience applauded, they loved it. And then I said, well, this is your inner champion. You carry it with you to let go of the inner critic. So brush it off.
Yes. Now, Gerhard, people will look at you and says, well, you're the CEO of Selling Power Magazine. You're the founder and creator of Sales 3.0. You're the creator of the Peak Performance Mindset program. You have connections. You've interviewed some of the top people all around the world, the top performers, and they'll say, well, you know, Gerhard is this and this and this, and he's probably always been that peak performer. And I know a little bit about your backstory from your childhood and everything like that, and the challenges you've gone through and everything. And why don't you tell a little bit about your own personal history, and that led you to what you were able to do to become that peak performer that everybody sees?
Well, I think that success it takes a village. You cannot do it on your own, and you need a lot of help. I felt, you know, when I was 9 years old, I set goals for my life, and my grandmother had a country inn in outside of Salzburg in Austria, and I remember distinctly writing down goals in block letters, and I said, I want to have a business like my grandmother, and
Wow.
because I saw at the end of the day how she counted the money and put it in little piles and brought it to the bank the next day. And I thought it was impressive that she gets money from everybody. So I wrote down, my second goal was a hot dog stand, because I like hot dogs. And the third was, I want to create a newspaper. I don't know why, but I remember everybody was reading newspapers when they came to the country, and you know, they had their breakfast, looked at the Salzburg newspaper, and they were happy. And you know, my grandmother read almost out loud, and I thought it was fascinating. And in 1981, I created a newspaper called Personal Selling Power, and it was a direct mail piece, actually, to sell my languages of selling sales training program that taught salespeople how to use nonverbal communication techniques together with professional selling skills. And that was the beginning of Selling Power magazine. People discovered it had good information, and then one thing led to the next, and people paid for subscriptions, and I built it up to the largest sales management publication. But I really, the things that turned around for me was the interviews with thoughtful, kind, and charismatic leaders like Mary-Kay, like Zig Ziglar, like Earl Nightingale, like Tony Robbins, like Mark Benioff from Salesforce.com, or like Richard Branson. And I think what I was good at is just calling people and saying, I want to do a cover story on you. And I got Larry King, I got Jay Leno, I got Malcolm Forbes, and I got Donald Trump. Anybody I wanted to interview, I mean, not everybody said yes. There was a ratio. I had to send out 5 or 6 letters with good reasons why they should do the interview with Selling Power magazine. But out of 4 or 5, I always got 1. I had a good closing ratio.
Yeah, that was good.
And I remember one of the most, the fastest response was from Malcolm Forbes. He had that Forbes Highlander, that big yacht where he entertained his clients, and a big successful company at the time, and a billionaire, and he had big parties in Morocco where he flew people to a birthday party. But I sent him a letter, and I thought he will never respond to that. And I sent the letter on a Monday, and on Friday, my assistant said, "Oh, there's somebody on the phone from New York. Want to pick it up?" So I picked it up, and he says, "Oh, this is Malcolm Forbes. I just got the letter." And I said, "Wow, when could we do the interview?" And he says, "How about now?" And I said, "I just happen to have a tape recorder. Do you mind if I connect it to my phone?" Which I did. And we had the most amazing conversation for about an hour. And then we published the interview. We sent it to him. He says, "I have no changes." And we published it in Selling Power. And the following month, Forbes magazine published the exact same article word for word in Forbes magazine.
Wow.
And they had over 1 million circulation.
Wow.
And you see, this is like when opportunity meets preparation, like Oprah says, that is real luck. That's what luck is about. You were prepared, and the opportunity presented itself. Had you not been prepared, and he had the time right now, and maybe if you reschedule, that would be available later. So also,
yeah, it takes a process, but I think that the real takeaway for somebody else who wants to learn from that on how to do it is just ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. And you got to know to me, problems are nothing but wake-up calls for creativity, because there's always another approach. I give you an example. I interviewed Terry Bradshaw, and we had a great time. And at the end, he said something so nice. He says, and it was around Christmas. He says, "Gerhard, that conversation was the best Christmas present." Aww. And I thought, yes. what a sweet thing to say. And then, he said, I said, "I need a picture." And he says, we got to be at the San Francisco Stadium for the playoffs. So why don't you send a photographer? And, so you get a good cover shot. I said, sure. So I wanted to get a press pass. No, first of all, I found a photographer and I said, go to Candlestick Park and take a picture of Terry Bradshaw. He will be there, and here's his phone number, how to get in touch with him. And the photographer says, sure, I'd be happy to do it. And he called me back and he says, there's no way I can get into Candlestick Park. I said, why not? This is a public place. And he says, no, the press passes, they were given out like a year earlier.
Wow.
And I said, well, no problem. Let me see what I can do. So I called the Candlestick Park PR department, and they said, you want what? A ticket to get in? You're crazy. I said, okay, thank you. So I thought, no problem. So I called the San Francisco Chronicle, and I said, can I speak to one of your photographers, sports photographers? And they asked, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, just wanted to, I'm a magazine publisher, and just wanted to get some, some question answered. I made it up. And then put me through, and then the sports photographer said, oh, I cannot do that. That's against company policy. We cannot do a photo shoot on the side while we are working for the Chronicle. It's not ethical, something like that. And I said, well, there are other newspapers. So I called the San Jose Mercury News and did the same thing. And they said, well, Jose would cover the playoffs in Candlestick Park, but he's not here right now. And I said, this is really urgent. Would you happen to have his home number? And they said, well, no problem. So I got the phone number, called the home number. He wasn't home. And his wife answered. And I said, I've seen, I did some research. I've seen Jose's photos. And I really like what he does with portraits. And I need a portrait of Terry Bradshaw. Would Jose be willing to do that? And my budget is $800. For one shot. And she says, of course he's going to do that.
Oh, nice.
An hour later, I got Jose on the phone, and we got a deal. He already had that press pass for the San Jose Mercury News. And we got a great cover story with Terry Bradshaw.
Wow.
Persistence.
Never give up. There's always
never give up.
Yes, yes.
Never give up.